Discover divine blessings. 1 hour of transforming prayer to reveal God's incredible plan for you. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, when the mighty Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem, the dark shadows of exile fell upon the people of Israel. Yet, within the vast expanse of the Persian Empire, another story unfolded, one woven with threads of providence and divine purpose. In the city of Susa, a Jewish girl named Esther, raised in the faith of her ancestors, was destined for greatness. Esther was strikingly beautiful, her grace capturing the hearts of those around her, but beauty alone could not prepare her for the trials of royal life. She had been chosen as queen after the bold Queen Vashti was banished, and though the palace sparkled with jewels and finery, Esther's heart remained heavy. Surrounded by opulence, she felt the crushing weight of her people's despair as word of Haman's decree, a vile plan to annihilate the Jews, reached her ears. Darkness shrouded her beloved people, and whispers of sorrow echoed through the corridors of the palace. Yet Mordecai, her wise and steadfast cousin, would not let despair take root in her heart. His voice, filled with urgency, pierced through the silence. Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews, for if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise. The reality of her situation pressed upon her soul like a boulder. Esther found herself standing at a crossroads of fate. There was danger in standing up, but there was also hope in action. Her identity as a Jew meant risking everything, yet was she not placed in the palace for such a time as this? As Mordecai's words resonated within her, her spirit began to awaken to a divine calling that transcended her fear. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select All Notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's Word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey. I'm always amazed how God's Word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. Though her heart raced with trepidation, Esther summoned her courage. Gather all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, she commanded, her determination setting the tone for what would come next. Like a burning lamp in the darkest of nights, Esther prepared for her moment, believing firmly that God was working through her even at that very hour. With prayer coating her heart in divine protection, she donned her royal robes, standing before the king, a daring act that could bring about her execution or salvation. Her beauty radiated from within as she drew upon her faith, knowing that the unseen hand of God was guiding each step. As the palace doors opened before her, one question hung in the air. Would she find favor in the sight of the king? A divine mystery surrounded Esther, and the unfolding of God's plan loomed just out of reach. Whatever the outcome, hope flickered like a flame, igniting the hearts of those who remained steadfast in faith. Would Esther's boldness lead to deliverance, or would darkness overshadow the people once more? The next chapter awaited its revelation. Esther stood at the threshold, her heart beating in tumultuous rhythm as she sensed the gravity of the moment. The king's throne room lay before her, a realm adorned with gold and glistening gems, yet she felt as if she had entered a storm. Silence enveloped her, the weight of fate pressing heavily as she took her first step inside, all eyes instinctively drawn to the queen. And the king, seated upon his lofty throne, lifted his gaze toward her. His countenance, a mixture of surprise and appreciation, softened as he beheld his queen. "What is it, Queen Esther?" he inquired, his voice echoing through the chamber, a sound both ominous and inviting. "What is your request? It shall be given to you, up to half of my kingdom." Yet, in that moment, Esther paused, the urgency of her plea surging through her mind. She had not come merely to request riches or accolades. Her heart ached for the very survival of her people. The weight of her ancestors pressed down upon her, the cries of her brethren echoing in her ears. And so she summoned the courage imbued in her by prayer and fasting. "If it pleases the king," she began softly, her hands trembling, "let me host a banquet today. I wish to prepare a feast for you and Haman." The king granted her request, and thus the art of persuasion began. As Esther prepared the banquet, she discerned how the hand of God had orchestrated her every step, weaving together a path between fear and faith. Each moment was cloaked in divine mystery, a revelation yet unfolding. At the banquet, as wine poured freely and laughter filled the air, Esther's pulse quickened at the thought of what must follow. King Ahasuerus gazed at her, intrigue glimmering in his eyes. "What is your request, my queen?" He iterated again, urgency threaded into his words. Drawing in a deep breath, she addressed him. "If I have found favor in your sight, let me speak my plight. My people have been marked for destruction, bound by the evil plans of Haman, your servant." The king's brow furrowed, confusion etched upon his features. "Who has dared to plot against you?" he demanded, his voice rising with righteous indignation. The fiery gaze turned upon Haman, who had reveled in wine's embrace but now stood defensively, realizing the peril of his schemes had been brought to light. With a steadfast heart, Esther revealed the truth, her voice unwavering. "This wicked man has decreed the annihilation of my people, the Jews. For I am a Jew, and that which threatens my kin threatens my very life." An electric tension filled the air. The reveling spirits of the banquet now transformed into a potent wind of vengeance on behalf of Esther's people. King Ahasuerus, enraged at the revelation, summoned his guards. "Hang Haman upon the gallows he has prepared for Mordecai," he commanded, justice burning brightly in his heart. And so Haman was led away, the gavel of God's justice striking true. Yet, as darkness lifted, Esther remained composed, aware that while danger had temporarily fallen from her path, the battle for her people was far from over. In the depths of divine purpose, Esther remained vigilant. The chapters of fate had shifted, but a greater unfolding awaited. A hope not yet revealed lingered just beyond her reach. What would become of her people now? The drums of destiny played steadily, for God's sovereign hand was guiding every step toward an end that would glorify Him, the ultimate deliverance. The sun dipped low upon the horizon as the ancient city of Susa began to cast long shadows, a foreshadowing of the trials yet to come. In that sacred silence, Queen Esther knelt in her chamber, her heart lifted in fervent prayer. The weight of her people's plight bore down upon her soul, and she cried out to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for wisdom and intervention. "O Lord," she lamented, "grant me clarity to navigate this perilous path. The fate of my people hangs in the balance." In her spirit, she felt the stirring of renewed hope despite the impending crisis. The remembrance of her cousin Mordecai's words echoed in her mind. "And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" As night descended, the king's rest was disturbed by divine orchestrating. Ahasuerus tossed in his bed, tormented by unshakable thoughts of treachery and loyalty alike. The scrolls of his reign were brought before him, and amidst them he discovered the account of Mordecai's loyalty, the noble act that had saved his life. "Who has rewarded him for this?" the king inquired, his voice steady yet tinged with urgency. The attendant hesitated, then replied, "Nothing has been done for him, my king." With righteous resolve, King Ahasuerus summoned Haman, whose heart swelled with pride at the summons, unaware that the wheel of fortune was shifting rapidly against him. As Haman entered the throne room, the king queried, "What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor?" Haman, blinded by his own ambition, believed the king referred to him alone, and declared, "Let royal robes be brought, the finest steed upon which he can ride, and let such a one be paraded throughout the city, proclaiming his glory." The king's gaze pierced Haman as he spoke. "Make haste and do so for Mordecai the Jew, at the king's gate. Spare no efforts in honoring him." The air was thick with divine irony as Haman's plans unraveled. He was compelled to honor the very man he had sought to destroy, thus serving as an unwilling instrument of ultimate justice. As Haman dressed Mordecai in the royal attire, leading him through the streets rang with the echoes of God's providence. Meanwhile, Esther donned her royal garments, prepared for the unforeseen outcome of her pleas at the second banquet. Her heart swelled with determination. God had been moving in ways beyond her understanding. When the appointed time arrived, Esther entered into the king's presence once more. The rich aroma of spices filled the air as she set her eyes upon Ahasuerus, who watched her with keen anticipation. "My king," she declared, "if I have found favor in your sight, let my life be granted me, and my people's life. For we are sold for destruction, and in peril we remain, like sheep without a shepherd." The king, filled with righteous indignation anew, demanded, "Who is it, and where is he, who has dared to do this?" Esther pointed to Haman, unveiling the serpent's true nature, and declared, "A foe and enemy, this wicked Haman." With the realization crashing upon him, King Ahasuerus rose in fury, and a profound silence enveloped the room, for the unfolding of God's sovereign plan was nearing its climax. In that dreadful moment, clarity blossomed in the heart of Esther. God was weaving an unbreakable strand of deliverance that would forever change the course of history. What would the outcome of this divine confrontation reveal? As the walls of fate trembled, Esther stood poised on the threshold of destiny, for the time had come for God's promise to manifest, a deliverance that would echo through the ages. As the furious king turned upon Haman, the air thickened with impending judgment, and all in the court held their breath. The wicked Haman's treachery had been laid bare, his intentions now as transparent as the finest crystal, reflecting the righteous anger of the monarch. Ahasuerus, consumed by rage, stormed from the banquet hall, leaving chaos in his wake. There stood Haman, his heart now filled with terror, instant horror painted upon his face. He knew his plot had been exposed. The gallows he had prepared for Mordecai now loomed ominously over his own head. "Will he now also seek to slay me?" Haman thought as he turned to Esther, who stood in regal dignity amidst turmoil. She had risen to the occasion, her courage emanating from a deep-rooted faith that the Lord God, creator of the heavens and the earth, was orchestrating this moment for the salvation of his people. "The gallows!" Haman exclaimed in desperation. "They were prepared for the Jew, Mordecai." At that moment, one of the king's men approached, a solemn look upon his face. "My king, Haman is to be executed. The penalty for such deceit and malice must not go unpunished." Ahasuerus nodded gravely, returning with a new determined stance. "Let it be done. Hang Haman upon the very gallows he erected for the innocent." With that decree, the king sealed the fate of Haman, a swift execution of justice that rang with the echo of celestial righteousness. As Haman was led away, a silence enveloped the court. The air held both dread and expectation, for the tables had turned. Queen Esther, heart trembling with the ferocity of divine providence, discerned the moment of deliverance for her people was near. Where once grievous despair had crept upon the Jews of Susa, now the light of hope began to shine through the cracks. Temporal shadows could not withstand the radiance of God's sovereign hand. Then Esther spoke boldly to the king. "If it pleases you, my lord, let it be known that the decree against my people must be reversed. We are but lambs of your kingdom, held in the grasp of Haman's wickedness." "Why should they suffer, my queen? What plan can be unveiled to save them?" Ahasuerus inquired with a newfound seriousness. "Let a new decree be issued in the name of the king," Esther replied, "that on the 13th day of the month of Adar, our people may defend themselves against those who would rise against them." let it be known that the destiny of your queen rests upon your verdict." At this, the king's heart was stirred by the Spirit of the Lord, igniting within him a desire for justice and compassion unlike before. "The Jews shall be allowed to defend themselves. Write, and let it be done according to your word, Esther." As scribed messages traversed the land, the hearts of the Jews swelled with courage, and fear gave way to strength. In their newfound hope, they rejoiced for the deliverance that had been promised, knowing that their God was fighting for them. Yet the storm clouds in the hearts of their enemies darkened, and plots continued to unfold. How would this tide of vengeance turn against Haman's aristocratic allies, who now plotted from the shadows? Esther stood poised, filled with courage and the spirit of her ancestors. She knew the weight of the legacy she bore. What further plans would the Lord reveal, and how would the story of her people ultimately unfold? In this cosmic battle of good against evil, God's divine design was yet to be completed, leaving a question upon the hearts of all who witnessed these unfolding events. What masterpiece was he forming from trials and tribulations that would resonate throughout eternity? And it came to pass that, as the written decree spread across the provinces of the empire, the Jewish people gathered in unity, their spirits lifted under the canopy of the Almighty's favor. In the vastness of Susa, many whispered words of hope, captivating the air with the promise of protection, as they recalled the scriptures of old, affirming that the Lord would not abandon his covenant. Esther, emboldened by the favor granted by the king, called together the leaders of the Jewish community. In a communal assembly, she said, "Brothers and sisters, let us prepare our hearts and minds. For we stand at a threshold of remembrance. Our forefathers, who cried out to the Lord in Egypt, trusted in his mighty hand to deliver them from oppression." Then Mordecai, lifted by the reverence of the moment, spoke passionately, "Let all of us remember the words of the psalmist. The Lord is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Thus we shall not fear the plans of our enemies, for we belong to the Most High, who watches over us." Across the land, the sound of their prayers, a canopy of voices rising like incense before the throne, filled the heavens, invoking the very remembrance of their plight. Their fervent cries ascended, and they pleaded, "O Lord, protect us. Fight for our deliverance. May our trust in you become the foundation of our courage." As the day of the 13th of Adar approached, the fear among their adversaries grew palpable. The enemies who had once plotted death now wandered in disarray, sowing seeds of doubt among themselves. What if the Jews, emboldened by their queen, rise against us? For we have stirred the wrath of a people whose God fights for them. They trembled among themselves. Esther, with her heart aligned to the Lord's purpose, sensed the urgency of the hour. She understood the weight of her call. It wasn't merely a battle of flesh and blood, but a spiritual warfare declared upon the very foundations of evil. She called upon the hidden wisdom of her ancestors. "Fast and pray for 3 days," she commanded. "Not a morsel shall touch your lips. For as we trust in his providence, we shall be filled with divine insight. In humility, let us seek the one who sees our hearts and knows our struggles." On the morrow, as the sun rose over the horizon, illuminating the land with golden rays, the people heeded her call. They gathered dressed in sackcloth, some dusting their heads with ashes, signs of their earnest humility before God. United in fasting, they sought the Lord's face, eager for guidance. And while they prayed, in the quiet of that fasting, the heavenly realms stirred. Angels stood ready to act upon the prayers of the faithful, and the Lord began to weave his unstoppable tapestry, revealing strings of destiny entwined with faith and hope. On the eve of confrontation, Esther approached the king once more, her heart steady with divine resolve. "My king," she began, her voice unwavering, "though we are but dust before your throne, let mercy reign. Grant me this one request, that our people may fight not with hatred, but a heart for their preservation." King Ahasuerus, now perceiving the magnitude of her plea, replied, "What is your request, my queen? even unto half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. In that moment, the fate of the Jews rested upon her words, pregnant with the weight of purpose and providence. Esther knew the battle was not merely with weapons forged by man, but with truth that transcended earthly realms. Then she made known the gravity of their plight, and in her voice echoed the fears and hopes of her kin. Yet within her spirit a deeper question stirred. Would the Lord fulfill his promises in times of uncertainty and trials? And as the king's heart was filled with compassion, concerns shifted like shadows, and within the chambers of the palace, God's sovereign plan began to unfold. All eyes turned toward the heavens, grappling with the mystery that enveloped them. What grand design would the Almighty reveal in the days to come? And it was on the morrow, as the dawn broke with soft hues of gold, that the hearts of the people trembled in anticipation. Esther, sensing the weight of her calling, donned her royal robes, radiant yet humble as she approached the king not as a mere queen, but as the intercessor of her people. "King Ahasuerus," she declared, her voice steady with divine courage, "I stand before you not as an ornament of your court, but as a voice of hope for a people unjustly condemned. For a decree has been issued against the Jews, who have known only fidelity to this kingdom. They are my kin, my blood, and I beseech you to grant us your mercy." The king, troubled by the emotions that rose in his heart, leaned forward upon his throne, compelled to grasp the depth of her words. "What is your request, O Esther? Speak plainly, and I shall not withhold favor from you." Then, emboldened by the prayers of her people and the silent promptings of the Spirit, she replied, "If it pleases the king, let a banquet be prepared, a feast for you and Haman, that we may discuss the matter with wine and grace. For in the joy of communion, truth shall be revealed." And so the king commanded the servants to prepare the feast, and they assembled under grand canopies adorned with splendid tapestries, while the smell of roasted meats and favored spices wafted through the air. As the meal unfolded, Esther rose from her place and poured forth her heart to the king. "At this feast, I wish to bring to light the treachery that has sought the destruction of my people, for there lies a plot against the Jews, and Haman, the king's trusted man, is the architect of this evil." The laughter faded, and the warmth of the meal hung heavy in the air. Haman, seated beside the king, shifted uneasily, sensing the weight of the moment. "What is this treachery you speak of?" he stammered, attempting to mask the rising fear in his heart. Esther, unwavering, continued, "My people are to be slaughtered, sold as mere chattel, and I, a Jewess your queen, seek justice. Let your heart be stirred to mercy, my lord." The eyes of King Ahasuerus blazed with righteous indignation as he turned toward Haman, his relentless glare piercing through the thick atmosphere. "What manner of man would conspire against my queen and her kin? Speak, Haman." Haman, now like a cornered animal, trembled as the truth of his betrayal unfurled before him. "O king, I sought only—" But his words faltered in the weight of his guilt. The king, enraged, stood, his voice shaking the very tapestries that hung overhead. "What shall be done to the man who seeks the destruction of the innocent?" In the recesses of his heart, he felt the urgency of justice. Before Haman could reflect upon his fate, the king commanded, "Let Haman be hanged upon the gallows he has prepared for Mordecai, the very man who saved this kingdom from ruin." As the decree left the king's lips, a quiet reverence swept through the assembly, the magnitude of divine justice unfolding with each breath. Esther's heart swelled with gratitude and awe, knowing that God was at work. The prayers of the faithful were met with a dazzling light of deliverance. Thus, in that moment, a revelation echoed through the realms of heaven. God was weaving a tale of redemption, turning sorrow into joy, aligning every thread of their agony into a rich tapestry of victory. And amid the echoes of divine justice, a new understanding gripped Esther. The time was nigh for God's promise to fulfill his covenant. With renewed faith, she pondered the broader strokes of God's plan swirling in the unseen, and as the gallows loomed for Haman, she whispered a prayer for the days yet to come. What mysteries would God unveil in his unyielding faithfulness? And it came to pass that as the sun dipped low upon the horizon, casting shadows across the land, a palpable stillness enveloped the court. Haman was swiftly taken, his fate sealed by the king's decree, while Esther remained, her heart steady but her spirit attuned to the turmoil still present in the realm. In the aftermath of the banquet, the king summoned his servants and commanded them to lead Haman away, bound for the gallows that loomed ominously outside the city gates. The people trembled, for the walls whispered the stories of redemption yet to be revealed. Unbeknownst to many, a greater battle brewed beyond their sight. Divine alliances were being forged in the heavenly courts. As the echo of Haman's name faded from the king's lips, Ahasuerus turned towards his beloved Queen Esther. "What more would you ask of me, my queen?" he inquired, his brow furrowed in concern. She could sense the weight of his royal burden, and with poised grace, she rose and approached him. "My lord," she began softly, "though justice has been meted out, the decree remains. Those whose hearts are heavy, my people, the Jews, await their fate. There is still a matter that requires your decree. Their doom has not been averted." This truth bore heavily upon her, for the threat still hung like a dark cloud over her kin. Ahasuerus pondered deeply, his heart torn between duty and the love he held for Esther. "What is to be done?" he asked, exuding an urgency that stirred in his breast. With conviction forged in the fires of prayer, Esther replied, "Issue another decree that we may defend ourselves against those who seek to destroy us. For aid is located not only in your edict of justice, but in your willingness to lend us your arm against our enemies." The king, moved by Esther's plea, summoned the royal scribes. By the authority given him, he penned a new decree. "To the Jews, in every province, a day of strength." His voice echoed through the court as he declared that, on the 13th day of the 12th month, every Jew should assemble and fight for their lives, granted protection and support to turn their mourning into joy. When Esther beheld the king's directive, her heart swelled as a new dawn brightened the heavens. The people would choose valor over despair, emboldened by the words of their queen. She turned her eyes upward, whispering words of gratitude unto the Lord, for she understood the power of prayer that could shift earthly rulers. Yet, in the shadows, darkness stirred, for even as God opened a path to salvation, the adversary sought to extinguish the light. As news of the decree spread, divisive murmurs echoed throughout the realm, and those who had once aligned with Haman began to conspire in secret, their hearts hardened against the Jews. Esther became aware of the spiritual warfare unfolding. She called upon the women of the court to join her in fasting and prayer, determined to invoke the power of the Almighty to fortify their spirits. "Let our cry rise as incense unto God, for our trust is not in the arm of flesh, but in the living God who watches over his covenant people," she urged. In that sacred gathering, as they prayed fervently, the atmosphere shifted. The air, thick with a promise, they momentarily beheld a vision of victory. Through each whispered prayer, the very fabric of the enemy's plans began to tremble, as unseen angels heeded their earnest supplication. And as the sun set upon that pivotal day, a steadfast hope filled the souls of Esther and her people. God's sovereign plan was unfolding in ways they could scarcely imagine. The time had not yet come for his promise, but beneath the shadows of fear lay the seeds of triumph, waiting for the appointed hour. What further marvels awaited them? In the depths of their struggle would they uncover the full measure of God's steadfast love? And it came to pass, as the days drew near to the appointed hour of defense for the Jews, that the heart of Esther remained steadfast, though a shadow of concern lingered. The decree had been sent forth, yet fear and uncertainty swirled among the people like a tempest. In every province whispers of treachery permeated the air, fueling the embers of hatred that had been ignited with Haman's malicious scheme. Esther, filled with a profound sense of duty, gathered her household and implored, Let us give of ourselves to prayer and fasting, for the Lord has promised that if we seek him with all our hearts, we will find him." The women of the court answered her call, united in spirit, each one standing before the Almighty, lifting their hands and voices in earnest supplication. Thus they prayed, a symphony of faith rising toward the heavens, weaving together a tapestry of trust in God's sovereign will. "O Lord of hosts," they beseeched, "deliver us from the hands of those who seek our destruction. Grant us strength and courage as we contend for our lives, for we are but lowly servants of the Most High." As they petitioned, a profound stillness filled the throne room, as if the very angels took notice of their cries. Within this sacred space the Spirit of the Lord moved, igniting hope and stirring courage within their hearts. They envisioned their ancestors who had weathered storms of despair, who had witnessed the mighty hand of God parting the sea and guiding them through the wilderness. In the dark corners of the land, unholy conspiracies were hatching. Those who once followed Haman stirred restlessly, emboldened by the promise of his unjust decree. With malice in their hearts, they plotted their approach, whispering one to another in the shadows. "This is our chance. The Jews will drink the cup of sorrow on that fateful day." Yet little did they know that their treachery would be turned against them. Days passed, and at last, the 13th day of the 12th month arrived. The decree had instilled a fire within the hearts of the Jewish people, transforming their despair into a fierce resolve. Armed with courage born from their prayers, they gathered in communities, ready to defend their lives. With unity, they prepared to confront their enemies, bolts of divine purpose igniting their spirits. Then the moment was upon them. As the sun ascended, casting light upon the earth, Esther donned the garments of her lineage and approached the king, her heart steadfast. "My Lord," she implored, "allow me once more to plead for my people. For though the decree has been made, they are still threatened by the wrath of those who hate us." Ahasuerus, gazing deeply into her eyes, was moved by the sight of her trembling yet resolute heart. He perceived the depth of her love for her kin, and recalled the power she wielded not just as queen, but as a daughter of the covenant. "What shall I do, Esther?" he asked, the throne of Persia trembling with expectancy. In that sacred moment she responded, "Let the enemies plot against us recoil upon their own heads, for the Lord who sees all has proclaimed our victory. We shall overcome." And the king's heart quickened, for the Spirit of God had prepared him to act. The scrolls were unrolled before him, and with a voice that rumbled like thunder, he declared, "Let it be known, no weapon formed against the Jews shall prosper, and those who rise against them shall meet their downfall." With each utterance the ancients echoed in unity, the decrees of God irrevocably binding the fate of the enemies of his chosen people. And thus, as the air quivered with anticipation, a new question arose in the hearts of the faithful, a mystery, deeply rooted in hope. What greater turn of events would the Lord orchestrate in the unfolding story of his people? For as shadows deepened, light promised to shatter them, revealing a more profound tapestry of divine intervention yet to be seen. And it came to pass, as the decree reverberated throughout the land, fear gripped the hearts of the Jews like a cold winter's night. They gathered in their homes, whispering prayers that curled like smoke into the heavens, pleading for deliverance from the grip of despair. The murmurs of Haman's plot echoed ominously, but amidst the dread, the flame of hope flickered within the hearts of the faithful. In the bustle of Shushan, word of the king's decree spread like wildfire, and many a Jew found their hearts heavy, their spirits dwindling. Yet Esther, emboldened by divine assurance, summoned her beloved cousin Mordecai. "Go," she urged him, "and rally our people. Let them know that we will not yield to fear. We shall fast and pray, for our deliverance draws near." Mordecai, stirred by Esther's faith, responded, "As you have spoken, so shall it be. Our people stand on the brink of destruction, but I believe that the Most High shall visit us with his mighty hand." With that vow, he set out to ensure each household was informed, igniting a resounding chorus of prayers across the city. While the threads of Haman's schemes wove a tapestry of malice, the righteous sought the cloaks of faith. Day by day, the cries of the faithful rose like incense before the throne of glory, each prayer a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. With every prayer, they presented their fears before the Almighty, trusting that He would intercede. On the eve of confrontation, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a profound silence echoed in the hearts of the people. They felt the weight of the darkness looming, yet in their resolve, a quiet assurance settled like dew upon the grass. For Esther had called upon the Lord, "O God, look upon us, do not forsake us." She prayed from the depths of her heart, and the heavens seemed to respond, as if the Creator Himself was reminded of His covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In her chamber, Esther prepared her heart, donning the garments of royalty once more. "I will go to the king," she murmured, "and if I perish, I perish. But I must seek mercy for my people." As she approached the threshold of the king's presence, the air crackled with heavenly anticipation. The king sat upon his throne, and as Esther was ushered in, Ahasuerus lifted his jeweled gaze upon her, marveling at her bravery. "What troubles you, Queen Esther? Speak, and it shall be granted unto you, even to half my kingdom." His voice resonated with authority, but it was softened by the tenderness he felt toward her. With courage swelling in her heart, Esther met his gaze. "If it pleases the king, let a banquet be prepared for you and Haman. There I shall tell you my tale and the plight of my people." In her spirit, she felt the weight of her mission. She sensed the divine orchestration guiding her steps. As the banquet unfolded, the tension grew, for Haman feasted, unaware that he was ensnared in the very web he had spun. But Esther saw through the shadows of deceit, knowing the moment of revelation drew near. And in the awareness of the thin veil separating peril from salvation, Esther whispered in her heart, "Lord, let your will prevail." Little did she know that the hand of providence was preparing a far greater moment, a culmination of prayers, a deliverance woven into the fabric of time, poised to reflect the unfathomable depths of God's plan. Thus, a divine mystery hung in the balance, as shadows contrasted against God's infinite light. How would the Lord unveil His sovereign purpose through Esther's courageous stand? The faithful awaited with bated breath, knowing that His plan was far greater than their understanding. And in that climactic moment, as the sun rose over the horizon of the 13th day of Adar, the Jewish people gathered with resolute hearts, emboldened by the prayers and declarations that had soared into the heavens. Esther, strengthened by her faith, emerged as the vessel of God's providence, her spirit aflame with the love of her people. The day had arrived when the power of the king's decree resonated across the lands, a call to arms mirrored with a call to faith. In each community, men and women prepared not just for battle, but they armed themselves with unwavering trust in their God, the one who had led them forth from bondage. They rose in solidarity as hearts united, proclaiming, "We are the children of the covenant." As they stood firm, fortified by prayer and purpose, God's hand stirred the hearts of the faithful, igniting courage within the souls of the oppressed. Esther, standing at the intersection of faith and action, encouraged the warriors of the Lord. "Remember who you are. We are a people set apart, chosen to be His light." Her voice rang clear, echoing through the ranks, knitting together resolve and divine inspiration. Meanwhile, in the shadows, fear gripped the hearts of their adversaries. The conspirators, once emboldened by Haman's treachery, now quaked at the rising tide of Jewish might, for they saw the power of God moving like a tempest among His chosen. The whispers of dread became a cacophony as the enemies recoiled, failures weighing heavily on their hearts as they recalled the very prophecy whispered for generations. As the time drew near for confrontation, Esther made her way to the throne room of King Ahasuerus one last time. Without a trace of fear, the weight of her mission pressed upon her. She stood before him boldly, her heart open and vulnerable. "O King, whose eyes see clearly the truth upon the heart, let not my people be consumed in a tide of malice," she implored with fervor. The king, now filled with a righteous fervor and having witnessed the wondrous hand of God, turned towards Esther and proclaimed, "Let the Jews rise to protect their lives. They shall have the right to defend themselves against those who would seek their undoing." The moment transformed. A silent victory radiated among the Jewish heart as the decree resonated through the palace, sparks of hope igniting in their souls. On that fateful day the Jews heightened their spirits, armoring themselves with confidence, ready to take a stand against the forces of darkness. With a mighty roar, they called upon the Lord of hosts, and the words of Esther's decree carried forth like a battle cry, echoing through the provinces. A divine empowerment whipped through the air. "Who is like our God? Who can stand against his chosen ones?" And as the heavens bore witness, a great and dreadful day unfolded. The people of God battled, not as defeated foes, but as conquerors under the banner of Yahweh. The shadows of despair fled before the light of their united resolve, for they understood that God had not abandoned them, but had arisen in their midst. When the sun set that day, a profound stillness enveloped the realm. It was a day of great deliverance, a day that proved God's faithful promises were not futile. They were a tapestry of his unending love and merciful intervention. The cries of victory resounded in the streets of Susa, the echoes transporting the hearts of God's people from peril to celebration. Their mourning turned into joy, and their defeat transformed into overwhelming triumph. Esther's heart swelled with gratitude, for she knew that it was not merely her courage that had led to this outcome, but the powerful hand of God moving through the hearts of his people. She recounted, with trembling resolve, the words of her cousin Mordecai. For such a time as this, in time, a festival was declared, an eternal commemoration of their deliverance and hope. The book of Esther would be read in joy, and upon its pages lay a testament to God's unwavering faithfulness, a reminder for every generation. Thus the Jewish people rejoiced, forever remembered as God's covenant children. Even as histories turned, the mighty lesson of deliverance rang clearer still. There is no earthly power greater than the unfathomable might of the Almighty to protect his people. And so, the echo of this divine narrative champions our lives today, beckoning us all into the embrace of God's eternal love. Are you ready to share in this journey? Subscribe immediately to our channel to not miss the next powerful biblical stories. Each like helps God's word spread through the algorithm. So, click like now. Your reflections matter, and I invite you to comment how this profound story has touched your faith. Don't wait even one more second to share this powerful testimony with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth. This is the moment to help spread biblical truth. Together, we can reach more souls for Christ.